Welcome back to the Wide Right Podcast. I'm Manny Navarro. Hopefully you can hear me better and see that I've got a new microphone for you. Hopefully the internet signal's working. I brought the pod over to strengthen things. Carlos Ledo of the MIA All-Day pod is back with us. Chunky but funky, as he says here, as his title. Carlos, it's Thursday, October 16th, the day before Miami hosts Louisville. We're recording this right around 1 p.m. Thursday, and I guess where's your mind? Miami, it's been a weird season because the Canes came out, they had those 4 games in a row, they had a bye week, then they go up to Florida State and pretty much handle the Seminoles, even though the fourth quarter was a little, I don't know, wacky, we'll call it. And then now they have another bye week, and then they got a Friday night game. Where do you sort of stand, even as a fan? Are you kind of thrown off by these bye weeks?
I'd prefer to have the bye weeks later in the season. I'm glad it came after Florida State, at least, in a rivalry game. But having this sort of start-stop for the Hurricanes, to me, is a little nerving, especially since they have to go through the rest of the season without any bye weeks, which, cuts down obviously on recovery time leading into the playoffs and leading into conference championship time. So for me, it's just annoying because I have to watch other people play football on Saturdays. Not that I mind it, but I prefer to watch the Hurricanes.
I appreciate the fact that you and I came out in our black uniforms today, black hats. It's almost as if we spoke about this before we went on the air, even though we didn't. But we're very much in unison.
It's just a reflection of the darkness of our souls.
I love that. That's great. Well, Miami is number 2 in the country still behind Ohio State. But the teams behind them have been shuffled a little bit, Carlos. Indiana with the big upset victory over Oregon in Eugene last weekend. We're starting to see things clear up a little bit in the SEC, some big SEC games this weekend. But the ACC has some interesting matchups too. And right now, Miami's only played 1 ACC game. They've got 7 left. No guarantees that they get to the ACC championship game because some other teams go undefeated. I don't know what the tiebreakers are going to be, but I know Miami doesn't play Duke. I know that they do not play Georgia Tech, who's undefeated, and those 2 teams meet this weekend. I think SMU is still undefeated. Let's take a look at the ACC standings here for a second, Carlos. I might as well.
And by the way, listen, this is where they're going to insert the YouTube comments. Manny is a hater. He's pissing on the parade. He's shitting on the Hurricanes, and he doesn't want them to make the conference championship.
Right. That's what I want. You got Virginia, who's undefeated here in conference play. SMU undefeated. Miami does play SMU, but essentially, it's a picture that has a long way to go before it plays out. The Canes, of course, have to take care of business Friday night against Louisville, who is a 4-1 team. Yes, they lost at home in overtime to Virginia, but they're also coming off a bye week, and they also have one of the best pass rushing units in the country. They're actually rated higher as a team in terms of pressure rate on defense. And they do blitz a lot. They are a team that has to bring extra blitzers. But the blitz is something very interesting, Carlos, because as I wrote for The Athletic this week, a lot of teams have not been coming at Miami with the blitz. They have been sort of dropping back in coverage. If you read my piece that came out 2 days ago, I mentioned how Carson Beck, Miami is the eighth least blitz team in college football. 19.6 compared to last season. Was blitzed on 29% of their quarterback dropbacks, which was 48th. The only top 25 team facing fewer blitzers right now is Oregon. So I'm guessing that the future opponents who do a pretty good job putting pressure on opposing quarterbacks, that would be Louisville, who I mentioned is second, Pittsburgh, the final game of the regular season, they're 8th. Teams are going to bring the blitz. They're gonna try to put more pressure on Carson Beck because when you look at Carson Beck's numbers against the blitz, not nearly as good as when he's kept clean. And so I wanted to take a look at those numbers as well. I'll flash those up here in terms of under pressure. These are from Pro Football Focus. You notice Beck has been kept clean on 85% of his dropbacks, which is why Miami has the best offensive line in the country, completing 77% of his passes, 9 touchdowns, only 1 pick with a clean pocket. And that was the one that Cormani McLean essentially stepped in front of in that Florida game. When he is under pressure, his numbers aren't very good. 7 of 17, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. When he's blitzed, his completion percentage drops down to 60%. 5 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. As somebody who played the quarterback position and understands college football, coach some of the high school level, Carlos, as you look at those numbers and you know some of these second half opponents, what would you dial up to try to slow down this Hurricanes offense?
Well, first, I think the reason why you're seeing Carson Beck struggle under pressure, I mean, obviously facing pressure is difficult for any quarterback, but I think the reason why that happens is now when you get pressure, you're facing more man to man coverage in general. Not a lot of teams in college will go zone fire and drop a tackle out or drop an end out and put that into coverage. And if they do, it's a rare occasion. So for the most part, when you're facing blitzes and pressure, you're facing man coverage. So what does that do? That means you've got to identify the matchup that's best and go to that matchup. What we've seen, obviously, throughout the season is, to me, still Miami's receivers don't get the kind of separation that you would like on a consistent basis. And the most consistent receiver has been Malachi Toney, who's not the kind of guy that's getting separation downfield. He's catching the ball underneath and making plays there, although he's had a couple big plays coming off the Florida State game. But to me, that's the reason that's happening. So if you'll see when it says when blitz there for Carson Beck, his big time throw percentage, the BTT percentage, drops to 2%. That means he's trying to check the ball down on completions and get rid of it. You see he's only thrown for only 356 yards under the blitz, which means, again, his yards per attempt have dropped to 7 as opposed to 9 when he's kept clean, greatly reduced, 5 touchdowns, 3 picks. He's not throwing the ball well when he's blitzed because he has to go identify that matchup, and he's not able to find it, and sometimes he has to force that ball where he doesn't want to. For me, if I'm an opponent coming into this game, I try to balance the blitz and zone, because at the same time, I don't want to have a situation where Miami is, finding the right matchup if I have a secondary that can't hold up in one particular spot and attacking me and beating me that way. But I also want to confuse Carson Beck and use as much as I can to try and throw him off. So that would mean not just coming with a linebacker, coming with secondary pressure, maybe doing a little zone blitz, drop 8 on occasion, mix the looks up to try and confuse Miami as much as possible, make him process as much as possible. The other reason why I think you may be finding a little bit less success when he's under pressure, and especially against the blitz when he's facing man, is, the air raid offense is great against man or zone, but really it operates best in areas of zone coverage because it's taught to run to grass. So these routes are designed to be a little bit more freewheeling rather than standard routes, but you know where the gaps in the zone are going to be, and that's basically where you settle up. They do have some great man pressure, some great man beater stuff, but if you don't have guys that can run away from man, it sort of hinders your offense.
Great explanation there. And, as I wrote my piece for The Athletic again that ran Wednesday, I started to play out the scenarios. Well, who's really left on the schedule that can beat Miami? And I know we talked a little bit about this last week. We showed you some team numbers, etc. But the teams that are best equipped right now, I would say, are Louisville and Pittsburgh, because they can create pressure. I mentioned already, they're top 10. Duke is another team that is top 10 in pressure rate. Manny Diaz obviously loves to bring pressure and uses blitzes, etc. So it's going to be really up to this offensive line to continue to play at an elite level. I think as long as they do that, Miami will be perfectly fine. And then, of course, running the football helps too, right? When you can effectively run on first and second down. And we saw that Florida State did a pretty good job. You have to give the Seminoles credit. They did a pretty good job slowing down Miami's running game. But in part doing that, they stuffed the box. They stacked it. They put a bunch of guys in there and completely committed and left their corners one-on-one. The first time Carson Beck tried to go down the field, he missed connecting. I think it was with Malachi Toney, right? It wasn't CJ Daniels. But then later in the game, he hit on some big passes. The flea flicker worked. But when you look at Beck's numbers in terms of passing depth, and you touched on this a little while ago, Carlos, as I flip on the
flap it, Manny.
Flap it, baby. Flap it. The passing depth numbers here for Carson Beck from Pro Football Focus. You can see that on throws 10 yards down the field or more, he hasn't done it very often. 45 of his throws, when you add up the percentages there, the majority of his work is underneath. His completion percentage isn't great. It's not. It's right around 50%, right below 50%. Yes, most quarterbacks are like this. They're going to be hit on much, shorter passes, etc. But the point is here, it's not always he's not hitting on 60 or 70% of his throws down the field is what the point is here. And you mentioned Malachi Toney, and we'll look at some numbers involving Malachi in a little bit because he is going to be on the Athletics midseason freshman All-American team and well-deserved. But they've really been reliant on Malachi and CJ Daniels to make plays after the catch. And as I wrote in my piece Wednesday, Miami's one of the best teams in the country when it comes to yak. I think 17th is what I had them at. They were 16th in the country, 152 yards per game, second best in the ACC behind Pittsburgh in terms of yards after the catch. And Toney has played a huge role in that. He's got 27% of the team's yak total, 42.2 yards per game after the catch, ranks 17th among all FBS receivers. It's the best mark in the ACC. So I think as long as Carson Beck continues to find those guys underneath, then Miami should be able to take care of business. But as you mentioned, teams are going to throw some wrinkles out there. Obviously, they've seen enough film. What do you think Louisville might do on Friday?
Well, I talked about it a little bit now when we discussed it before. First of all, let's just get this out of the way because you said Yak one too many times. Ace Ventura 2 is one of the greatest movies of all time. I happen to like Ace Ventura. I'm a huge San Marino fan. Dan's my
Yes,
goat. But I feel that Ace Ventura 2 is funnier than Ace Ventura 1. What do you think?
I agree. Yes, it
Good.
is funnier.
Now we can move on. Okay, so to me, the concerning thing is, Carson Beck's completions. He's got 64% of his total completions from 9 yards or less. I understand that you can't take a deep shot every time. For me, the medium passing percentage, that 10 to 19 range, is a concern because he's only got 16.4 of his attempts there, and he's only completed under half of his passes in that range. You need that if you're in third and longs, which Miami hasn't done well in this season. It hasn't faced a whole lot of it, but when they haven't been coming up with it. So if I'm Louisville, if I see this kind of stuff, I see that Beck obviously likes to throw a ball underneath. We understand that Miami, their big plays are coming from yak. So you're going to want to mix in, aside from the blitz, you're going to, like I said, drop 8, get people back in coverage, force them to throw the ball in front of you, and then come up and gang tackle on the ball and make sure you're a sure tackling team, because that's where you sort of get in trouble if you miss that first attempt and guys aren't able to rush to the ball and finish it off for you. Then you're in trouble because you're giving up a big play. So for me, it's make them throw the ball in front of you, come up and gang tackle, and make sure that Miami has to earn it all the way down the field, as opposed to giving them big pops and big explosions in the offense.
Well, I wanted to show, just because I love this new little
You
toy
got
I
a new
have.
toy. You like to use it, play around with it. I get it.
I wanted to show Cam Ward's numbers, but I'm struggling here to load it into the system here that we have. But I'm going to give you, comparing Carson Beck to Cam Ward and how this offense is different. Okay, I'm just going to read you some numbers. Last year, Cam Ward, this is amazing. This is why he was the number 1 overall pick, right? You've got Carson Beck's numbers up. You can compare this. I'm just going to read you Cam Ward's numbers. On throws 20 yards downfield or more. Okay, first of all, he attempted 16.5% of his attempts were 20 yards down the field or more. He completed 45.3% of them for 15.3 yards an attempt, 14 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, 29 big time throws, 5 turnover worthy passes. From medium depth, he attempted 25% of his passes from there. So you add up the numbers together there. That's over 40% of his passes were 10 yards down the field or more. Okay. On medium passes, 11 touchdowns, 5 picks, completed 67.5% of his passes. So when you start talking about how offense looks different and how different it really is, those numbers to me tell a story, do they not, Carlos?
Right. I mean, in the 20 plus, you could see that he and Carson Beck aren't that dissimilar. Obviously, he's got a ton more touchdowns. His big time throw percentage, his big time throws are more. But in terms of completion percentage and percentage of attempts downfield, Cam Ward's slightly ahead, but it's not that big of a difference. But the difference is in that 10 to 19 range. And that's why Miami was number 1 on third down offense last year. Because when you get into a third and medium, third and long, Cam Ward was able to get the team out of that hole and continue drives. They didn't have to rely on a fourth down play as much. So having that guy that can not only, obviously find those underneath routes, find the safe throws, but be able to push the ball down the field beyond the first down marker is critical, because you can move the ball down the field a lot faster and score points quicker.
I found the numbers. I was able to get them up here. I'm gonna load them into the system. But now these are Cam Ward's passing depth numbers. You see how they compare to Carson Beck. I mean, it's really impressive. It shows you why the NFL teams ultimately decided, he was the best quarterback available last season. And look, yes, the Titans just fired their coach. Uh, he doesn't have a whole lot of help around him in the NFL right now. But I think this is a guy. We talk about it. We talked about it a lot last year. Probably the best quarterback to ever come through Miami from a pure passing
Yes.
ability perspective.
Yes, hands down.
I don't think that's hogwash in any way, shape, or form there. All right, Carlos. So we've had a deep, in-depth Carson Beck discussion. I don't know that I necessarily thought it was going to play out that way, but it was sort of a fun
This is
thing
what
to
happens
go
when you don't
through.
prep before a show. We just freestyle it, baby. We go out there and we drop a hot 16 every time we come on.
Pretty much. And we got mailbag questions we're going to get to. But here's another interesting chapter. And I covered this in my story. How many good quarterbacks, passing offenses remain on Miami's schedule? Because let's not forget, going into the season, what was our number one question?
Yeah, the
Secondary, right? We had to see if those guys prove themselves. Right now, Miami's got the third best pass efficiency defense in the ACC. And I think those numbers would be better if they didn't take their foot off the gas pedal, so to speak, against Notre Dame and Florida State, right? Because the offense wouldn't have sort of stopped playing in the fourth quarter, and the other team wouldn't have had the ball and the opportunity to score. But Miami essentially decided to just punt and play defense, I think, in those two games. So I think pass efficiency defense is third best. But between how good they get after the quarterback and how improved the secondary is a much better defense than the one that struggled through last season. So in terms of the quarterbacks that are left on the schedule, okay, Miami's to this point has faced two top 25 quarterbacks in terms of efficiency. CJ Carr's number 7. Tommy Castellanos, believe it or not, is number 23. So two top 25 quarterbacks. They've beaten both of those guys. Well, who's left? You got Kevin Jennings, who's 19th in QB efficiency. He's over at SMU. That's a road game, first road game of the season in November. You have CJ Bailey, who's 26th. And then you got this kid, CJ Bailey, of course, at NC State. NC State comes to Miami. And then you got this kid, Mason Heinschel from Pittsburgh, who just finished beating Florida State this past weekend. He would be a top 15 passer in efficiency if he maintained the numbers he's produced over his first two starts here, Carlos. And then in terms of receivers, Miami has had
where's Miller Moss?
not top, not up there. Let me look at his numbers. I can tell you right now where he ranks.
Just get an idea to see where he's at.
Yeah, let me give you the efficiency numbers for Moss. He is 65th. Okay. 7 touchdowns, 4 picks. And that's, part of the reason when you look at Louisville's numbers, they're not offensively, this has not been a good season for Jeff Brom, yet they've only got 1 loss. So just not performing at the same level. They do have a top 5 receiver in Bell, who I mentioned to you. That guy's very good. He's a top 5 in terms of yardage. To this point, Miami has faced 2 top 50 receivers, Chase Nimrod from South Florida, who had a good day against them, and Deuce Robinson from Florida State, who had 6 catches for 87 yards. So
I think Bell's better than both of them.
Yeah, Bell is 5th right now in the country in receiving yards per game. And then Romello Brinson, remember good old Romello Brinson, former Hurricane? He's at SMU. He's 26th, averaging 80 yards per game. So when you look at the rest of the schedule, you look at Friday's test, you're not facing a bunch of elite quarterbacks on the stretch. So to me, this is very much, my article was titled, "Can the Hurricanes go undefeated? Here are the key obstacles." Right now, Carlos, to flip the subject forward, I mean, how confident are you this is going to be a 12-0 regular season?
Listen, on paper it should be, but again, I have PTSD, Manny. I've been kicked in the nards way too many times. I've had this team drop kick me and drop like the super elbow, like Randy Macho Man Savage off the top rope, snapping into me like a Slim Jim for 20 some odd years, and I can't get it out of my head. So until we finish the season undefeated, I'm always going to have that thought on the back of my mind of, okay, when is this going to blow up? But on paper, this team should go undefeated. There's no other team on their schedule that holds a candle to them in terms of talent, in terms of what they produce so far this season. They should be able to handle the schedule. But again, it's matchups too. Who do you face and at what point in the season and how healthy are you? All those things are factors that are going to determine whether or not they go undefeated. Like going into this game, like I said before, I was concerned that the highs of the Florida and Florida State game back to back, even though there was a bye week in between this game and Florida State, could get the Hurricanes a little complacent just because of where they're coming from and what their status is in terms of their health. The other thing is, Louisville has a coach that knows how to scheme things up. Their offense hasn't been great, but they've been good. They've been solid. They've been okay. 30, I think they're ranked 38th in the country in terms of scoring offense, 34th, somewhere in that range. They're not terrible. Defensively, I think they're a lot better than they look in terms of their points per game numbers because they've given up a few touchdowns thanks to the offensive side of the football. I mean, last week against Virginia, right off the gate, they fumble the ball and they run it back for a touchdown. Virginia does. And they also gave up a pick six against Virginia. They only gave up 16 points on defense out of the
Right.
30 that Virginia
No,
scored.
that's the area where they're better. That's the area where they're solid. This is to me the best team that they're facing at home. But that Pittsburgh game, because it's on the road, is a little more dangerous to me because we've seen that movie play out before, right? We've seen them lose to a freshman quarterback, and blow an undefeated season at the end. So, look, Louisville ranks 57th in yards per game. I think where they're struggling more than anywhere else has been the running game.
Yeah.
They really have not run the football,
which is shocking because Isaac Brown is a good back.
Yeah, but Duke Watson, who's the other guy, but they rank 113th right now in rushing. Okay, Louisville does in terms of yards per game. But Kewan Brown, I think, has been banged up. He was sort of the second element there. Isaac Brown's been averaging over 7 yards a carry. He's done a good job, but there's only so much banging he can do. I mean, Isaac Brown is 5'9", 190 pounds. Duke Watson is not Duke Watson. Kewan Brown and Duke Watson are bigger backs. Kewan Brown's 5'10", 210, and Duke Watson is 6 foot 180, a little bigger, a little thicker maybe.
But that's why there's only so much banging you could do. But that's why God invented Guarapo. That's why. That's why there's Cialis, Viagra, Spanish fly. There's all kinds of things, remedies for those backs. But listen, Isaac Brown is a really good back. I think they need to give him more carries. I think they need to stop splitting carries and focus on him in the running game. And I think offensively, Louisville, if you're coming into this game, the one thing you have to do is protect Miller Moss. And part of that is running the football. You've got to be more aggressive running the football. The other thing you want to do is take possessions away from the Hurricanes so you aren't giving them the football a bunch of times to score a bunch of points and then having to try and catch up, right? So you want to try and limit the possessions, be within a score the whole game, and then see what happens at the end. So for me, I'm using two tight ends most of the game if I'm Louisville. Jaleel Skinner, there's another callback, is a tight end for them. He's their leading receiver at tight end. Karinsky's their other tight end. He's a big dude, more of a blocker, but could catch the football as well. So I'm using those two dudes most of the game. Bell's going to get most of my targets. I'm going to run the ball with Isaac Brown. I'm going to go play action. I'm going to double the ends, right? So I'm going to use those two tight ends not only to try and get matchups on the linebackers and the safeties of Miami to try and get open that way because I don't want to test the corners outside of testing whoever's on Bell. But I also want to try and get those matchups, but I also want to use them in terms of limiting Ruben Bain and Mesidor's attempts at getting at Miller Moss. So using those two tight ends allows me to chip with the tackles and also widen the surface areas to make their rush lanes a little bit deeper, a little bit longer, and make it harder for them to get into Miller Moss, allowing him to step up in the pocket, climb the pocket, and try and find somebody open. That's what I would do if I was Louisville. Run the football, use two tight ends, and limit the game. Try and possess the ball as much as I can.
You realize that the show that we're doing today is how to beat Miami. That's what all the listeners are going to say. You guys are sitting here giving away all our secrets and talking about what I would do to beat Miami, and we're being haters. We're not praising them enough. They're number 2 in the country, and we're sitting here trying to game plan to beat them.
Listen, they want us to be they want us to wash more balls than a caddy at Augusta, right? They want us to wash the Hurricanes' balls consistently. They want us to hang off Mario's nuts as if we were Cirque du Soleil performers. And that ain't going to happen, bro. We're just going to tell you how it is. I'm telling you what to look for. If there's a way for this team to be sort of vulnerable in this game and see, I'm just telling you what might be it. Because it gets boring hearing that shit all the time of how great these guys are. Oh, we're back. We're going to win the national title now. We're going to go undefeated the rest of the season. Yeah, it's good. You can get that anywhere else. There's 150,000 podcasts that you can get that from. If you want that, you are in the wrong place, bro. You are in the wrong spot, okay? So, sorry. You ain't going to get it here. You're going to get the truth from us. You're going to get some insight along with some mediocre comedy and some very good-looking old men.
Yeah, the last part is true. All right, so I do want to give them some of their flowers here and show more of my graphics because I've got access to this cool machine and I love my toys.
You paid for it, so you might as well use it.
I might as well use it, right? Let me go here to. I was going to mention Malachi Toney. I wanted the fans to really realize just how special this guy has been. I told you he's already going to be a midseason All-American here for the Athletic, and I think he's been pretty much named everybody else on 3-2-4-7. But I wanted to show you where he stacks up between first and second year receivers, because look, Jeremiah Smith, right? Everybody knows that's the benchmark. That's the potential future number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft, a special talent from South Florida that Mario really wishes was here. But I wanted to see where he stacks up among the best young receivers. This is first and second year guys in college football. I'm going to flip my little graphic on, and you can see that when it comes to receptions, first and second year receivers, Malachi Toney, ninth, tied for ninth there in terms of catches. You look at Yak. Yak is my favorite, yards after the catch, Carlos. I know you love it when I say Yak.
Yeah.
211 yards after the catch this season. And then that little column, the one all the way to the right, that's air yards per target. You look at it, he's only averaging 7.67 yards in the air when he's catching the ball. That's how far down the field he is when he's catching it. You look at Jeremiah, 9 yards. Up there at the top, Mario Craver, who's having a sensational season.
Hey, listen, you know what this shows me right now? Mario needs to go shopping in the portal for Jordan Napier and KJ Duff.
This is what we're doing. We're helping Mario out here. We're self-scouting, right? We're self-scouting for him. We're providing
look
guys
at those air yards.
Look
at those air yards on KJ Duff. My man's a burner.
Greg Schiano gave him a defensive coordinator. He's really going to go and take his best receiver away from him? I guess so. It's a dirty game, isn't it?
Yeah. Listen, Mario would steal Schiano's girl if it meant a national title.
Well, I'm gonna help him out because I'm with another graphic here, because we talk about how do you replace Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor when they go to the NFL next year, right? Well, let's look at the defensive pressure guys, the most pressures in the country. You'll see Ruben Bain, 29 total pressures there, is 9th overall. This is all courtesy of True Media. Mesidor is 13th, tied for 13th there. I didn't look for just first and second year players. This is everybody in the country. That receiver list I had up was just first and second year players. So guys that can't go to the NFL yet, because you can't leave until after your third year. But some of these guys might decide to come back if the price is right, to come play another year of college.
Come on down. So the price is right.
Now, I will say this: Miami's distinct advantage in this game, and we talked about this earlier, is that they have a top 5 unit on both sides of the line of scrimmage. Offensive line best against pressure, defensive line 5th as a team overall. Louisville's offensive line is not exceptional. It's average. I think I wrote in my story they're 77th, if I'm not mistaken, or somewhere in that range in terms of protection rate. Not necessarily a huge or dominant group there. So to me, when I look at Friday night's game, it's really going to come down to, does Miami force Louisville to be one-dimensional? Do they shut down the run? To this point, Miami's been very good in run defense, and I think entering this week, I want to say second best run defense in the ACC behind Pittsburgh and top 15 overall. So can they basically force Louisville to be one-dimensional? And then does that allow Ruben Bain and Akeem Mesidor to eat? And I think if they do that, then I think Miami covers the 13.5 point spread and they win this game easily. But I'm giving Louisville the benefit of the doubt, and I wrote in my piece today, my oddly specific predictions, that I think Miami wins this game by 7 to 10 points, not covering the spread, just because it's a Friday night game. And that guy calling the plays on the other side is pretty good.
Yeah, and not to mention, we've talked about Miami's struggles with penalties over the last few weeks as it's gotten worse. Coming off a bye week, are they going to be clean? Are they going to be efficient? Did they clean those things up during the bye week? And turnovers, like always. If Miami commits bad penalties, extending drives for Louisville, or putting themselves in holes to give Louisville a short field following punts, does that give them more opportunities to score? Does Miami turn the ball over on their own half of the field, giving Louisville opportunities to score? Does Louisville turn the ball over like they have the last couple of weeks and put themselves in a hole that's too big to get out of? So turnovers, penalties, ball control, time of possession, I think is very important. Whoever runs the football best in this game probably wins, just because I think Louisville, like I said, is going to try and control the clock, and I think Miami wants to beat the crap out of their opponents up front and then play off that to allow Carson Beck to get big plays.
Yeah, and I think the interesting element for me when I start looking at Miami and questions that I have for them, look, they've been very reliant on Malachi Toney and CJ Daniels, and their receiving numbers show it, right? Those are the two main dudes. But Mark Fletcher, Chamar Brown, we're splitting a lot of carries. We saw Jordan Lyle get into the game against Florida State. He's got 12 carries for 29 yards so far. Has not been super effective. At some point, though, Lyle is going to make an impact, I'm really interested. To me, he's the X factor in this season because I go back and I think of the national championship season, right? The last time this team won when they had Portis and all those different options in the backfield. I do think they need a third guy, either at receiver or running back, to take some pressure off of the main dudes that they're using.
Yeah, that way you don't overwork them, right? And then you keep them healthy. If you're able to split those carries and be effective, there's less wear and tear on these guys as they're moving on during the season. If you're giving a guy 20, 25 carries a game, he's going to get worn out by the time the playoffs roll around. Whereas if you're splitting those 30, 40 carries a game amongst three backs, you're keeping your legs fresh. And also, again, remember, it's matchups. Sometimes guys play better against different types of teams. Their style fits the defense are playing better. One guy's able to cut back faster, has better vision, is better zone stretch guy as opposed to a power downhill guy. So depending on what the matchup is and what it calls for, then you could give that guy the ball, and whoever's got the hot hand can take it.
Yeah, and so I'm interested to see who emerges. Are there other guys that start to become sort of bell cows for this offense to lessen the load and ease some of the pressure on the main producers? Because all the great teams, the championship teams, have just layers and layers and layers of playmakers. And to this point, Miami's been able to get through their first 5 games pretty solidly,
Yeah, and
counting
look,
on those
speaking
guys.
of that last national championship team, and then the team after that lost or was robbed by Ohio State, you had guys that weren't just the frontline guys that would make plays every game on occasion that you could rely on, right? You had an Ethnic Sands, you had a Kevin Beard, you had Andre King in 2000. You had those kinds of guys that you could rely on. And even though Clinton Portis was a starter, you had Frank Gore getting those carries. You had Willis McGahee as a third back. Nigel Davenport at fullback would make plays. So you had guys that you could rely on and spread the wealth with and look for the right matchup. And then on occasion, it would be that guy's game and you could rely on him.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the mailbag, Carlos, because I want us to be able to tackle some new subjects. Hopefully, you guys learned something there, or maybe we learned something. I mean, we're just talking to each other here as we
Yeah,
go.
we just learned that we're pretty good. We're pretty good at this, I think.
We've
Nobody else thinks it, but we do. Damn it! And I'm good enough, and I feel good about it.
all right. Let's get to our mailbag questions and thoughts. I'm going to start off with Alex Avila. Asa Bolts Alex, as he calls himself on Twitter. Manny, it'd be good to hear a breakdown of the other ACC contenders and who you all favor to get there besides the Canes. All right, Carlos, I'm going to go back to the standings here really quick and flash the contenders,
Flash
so to
it, Manny.
speak.
Flash it.
Flash it. Georgia Tech is undefeated in conference play. Virginia is undefeated in conference play. Duke is undefeated in conference play. SMU and Miami are all undefeated in conference play. Pittsburgh, Louisville, and California all have one loss. Obviously, a lot of football to be played. Georgia Tech and Virginia are the only other 2 top 25 ranked teams at the moment. Virginia's big win is over a Florida State team who's no longer ranked. Georgia Tech's big win is over a Clemson team that has mightily disappointed. So, what are your thoughts initially, without looking at numbers, without breaking it down, just your feel factor? If you had to put, I don't know, $100 down on who plays Miami in Charlotte, who are you picking?
Wow. I'd probably lean to Georgia Tech, but I think the team, believe it or not, the team that probably has the best shot, or at least controls their destiny best, is Duke, because Duke plays both Virginia and Georgia Tech,
Right,
and Virginia and Georgia Tech don't play each other.
right,
So
correct. Duke can win its way in,
Duke can win its way in. Duke has a shot at winning its way in. And
and they get Virginia at home, by the way.
what would that look like if Mario's first trip to the ACC championship game is against Manny Diaz and the Duke Blue Devils? Can you imagine that? First of all, I know we've crapped on him before for being a paper Cuban, but we'd have 2 Cuban head coaches coaching for the ACC title. How about that? I know people are going to hate on me for that, for mentioning nationality, but that's fine. But either way, Mario versus Manny for all the marbles at the ACC title game.
Yeah, it would be nutty, and to this point, Duke's got a head-to-head win over California. Just if we're going to start looking at the Duke train, so to speak, um, their losses are to Tulane and Illinois, not necessarily great teams, just okay teams that are borderline top 25. His quarterback obviously has done a really good job. The kid they got out of the portal, Darian Mensah, is one of the best quarterbacks in the country, statistically speaking. They've got a really good freshman running back who made the midseason freshman All-America team for us, who's done a good job. I think Shepard is his last name. I'm trying to remember his name now. I think he leads all freshmen in rushing yards. So they have some playmakers, some guys that can make, that can beat you. But I think defensively, when I look at them, they have not been as good as maybe traditional Manny Diaz teams are. They gave up 33 points to C.J. Bailey and NC State, 45 to Illinois. So that's
look at their point differential in conference there, 128 to 57. They've only given up 57 in conference in three games.
Right. And whatever, that's under 20 points a game right now. But, it's still, 33 points to NC State is kind of a little eye opening to me. Look, they get Georgia Tech at home this weekend. That's a huge game. If you're looking for something to watch on Saturday, noon, Georgia Tech at Duke, that's going to tell us a lot about the conference race. The rest of Duke's schedule is Clemson, UConn, on the road at UConn. Not that that's a conference game; it's an out-of-conference game. And then they've got Virginia, North Carolina, and Wake Forest. So I think if they get past Georgia Tech and are able to pull off a road win at Clemson, and let's face it, I mean, Duke's already beaten Clemson once here in recent history, right? Under Mike Coco, they did it. And this Clemson team has 3 losses. If they're able to get past Georgia Tech and Clemson the next few weeks, I would say Duke is the odds-on favorite. But
and here's another hot take: if they make the ACC title game, Manny Diaz is going to get hired by Penn State.
Yeah, I don't think he's high profile enough for the amount of money they're going to be spending. I think Penn State is looking for a guy who is going to be a big name. They need to sort of excite the fan base and all the people that are giving them money. And while I think Manny Diaz is a fallback plan. I think he's a plan C for them. Matt Rule. Right.
Now, what do you think about? Would you think they'd ever turn to Al Golden?
No, I don't think Al Golden. Well, I mean, that's probably that's like a plan C, plan D type guy. I think Al Golden's, some of these guys don't want to come back to college and be head coaches. When I covered Notre Dame in the OB, not in the Orange Bowl, but the semifinal, it was at Hard Rock Stadium last year when they beat Penn State. The sense I got from Al at that time was, he really enjoyed coaching, being a coordinator. And he gets to do that, at the next level up in the NFL and deal a lot less with the kids today and NIL and all that other crap. And I think a lot of coaches are in that same boat. So,
yep.
All right, let's get back to the mailbag. There's a couple questions left to sort of dive. Well, should we answer who the other teams? I think Georgia Tech is the other obvious answer, or Virginia. Those one of those.
Right. It's going to be one of those 3. I think Georgia Tech to me is the better of the 3 teams. Although Virginia's looked good the last couple of weeks. It's going to be a toss up. It's going to be a toss up. But I think, like I said, the one that controls their own destiny is Duke.
I agree. All right, let's dive into more mailbag questions here as I look. This one is from our buddy JBoy1724 Javier. What's up, guys? Who is the key player, the key unit on offense and defense that needs to step up for Miami to win and cover the spread? Second question, what should we worry about with Jeff Brom schematically that could cause Miami to be outcoached for this game? Gracias. And then he says, one more. Statistically, Louisville's D-line looks good, and their defense overall seems good on paper. But do you think this is misleading because of the competition they've played with only 2 real games played so far? Are they not as good as the numbers indicate, or somewhere in between? Which part of his question do you want to dive into first?
All right, I'll take that last part first. I think their defense is better than the numbers show. Especially over the last couple of weeks. I think it's because of the turnovers that the offense has committed that's given up points. It's made them look a little bit worse. Mm-hmm. What are the other questions?
Who is the key player and key unit on offense or defense for Miami that needs to step up for them to cover the spread?
I think it's always offense and defensive line. I think if Miami dominates there, that's where it all starts. If they could dominate running the football and dominate getting pressure on Miller Moss, I think they're good.
I agree. I think that's it's the line of scrimmage. If they come out and set the tone on Louisville, and Louisville cannot get to Carson Beck and put any pressure on him, then I think he's
They're done.
going to cook. That was our whole show, was about that, and why we covered that topic. So,
And look at that, using little Gen Z language. I like it. He's gonna cook.
yeah. Well, I mean, listen, my daughters use it all the time. So
Bro,
it's a
please
constant.
don't. And let's not get into 6'7".
No 6'7" for me. All right, J.K.
He
Slay.
had one more. No, he had like 3 of them.
Yeah, he had 3. I think we tackled them all because the D line, Louisville's D line looks good. But is it misleading? I don't think it's misleading. I think, look, a lot of people don't have a big sample size so far of who they've played, and the conference schedule is just we're just sort of getting into it now for a lot of teams. Look at Louisville's
He asked
schedule.
about Braum, what Braum might do.
Oh yeah.
Offense.
Yeah,
So,
we kind of talked about that too earlier,
right.
but you want to dive back into it. Go ahead.
And I think aside from what I've said, I think the other thing that Braum does well is he's used in the past unbalanced formations to try and gain edges in the run game to get numbers, and I think he'll look to do that as well. I think he ran a couple beautiful trick plays this season. Last week against Virginia, he ran a fake flea flicker where he handed the ball off to Isaac Brown. Isaac Brown turned, faked the pitch, and kept running, and that's one of the first few times I've ever seen that. So I think he's creative in that way.
I will say this: they won a good game against a good Pittsburgh team a couple of weeks ago. And yes, they lost to Virginia at home, but as you mentioned, that was turnover related. And the James Madison team that they beat at home a couple of weeks ago, yes, it's a group of 5 team, and let me look at James Madison's record right now. They're not necessarily some dominant, playoff bound team, but they're 5-1. James Madison is 5-1. They've taken care of business against the other, G6 schools, and so
they've won games against the D1 schools the last couple of years. They're not bad, but
it's not necessarily a bad set of wins. It's not Miami's schedule. It's not Notre Dame, Florida, and Florida
but
State.
I would say JMU is better than Bethune.
Oh yeah, for sure. And so to me, I wouldn't disparage, who they've played to this point in terms of Louisville. All right, J.K. Slay with a question here. Evaluating the last 5 games, do you think this team has shown improvement week over week? And if so, where do you think the team can be by year end without major injuries? Improvement. Have you seen improvement, or have you just seen consistency? To me, I've seen a lot of consistent good play.
I've seen more
I haven't seen many dips.
Yeah, I've seen more consistency, and the patterns that have emerged from week 1 have really continued. And we've seen that, like we talked about, the second half lulls on offense, the penalty issues, but also the continuing trend of Malachi Toney being reliable, CJ Daniels making big plays, Carson Beck being efficient, that defensive line being just monstrous, having the 2 best defensive ends in the country, the secondary being reliable. So all these things have been consistent. I haven't seen them shoot up in one specific area or another where they look like they're a lot better than they were in week 1.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's been a lot of consistency, and that's what you want, and I think if you're consistent and you stay healthy, then this is a team that's right there, playing for a national championship or making a deep run in the postseason. And let's not forget, the Orange Bowl does host a quarterfinal game. So let's Miami gets a top 2 seed. I think odds are pretty good they will be at home, hosting in the quarterfinal round, probably an SEC team, because right now as it projects, you're probably going to end up with 5 SEC teams, 3 Big Ten teams, and just everybody else.
Team.
1 ACC team, 1 Big 12, and 1 group of 6. That's probably the way it's going to end up. So I think that's that at Notre Dame. If Notre Dame runs the table, Notre Dame has a big game this weekend against USC. So Miami does need, in terms of helping how high Miami climbs in the poll and stays in the poll, I think Notre Dame, beating USC this week would help a lot in that regard, because we see the way that the pundits and everybody talks about things. Oh, Notre Dame falls out of the playoff picture. All of a sudden, Miami's resume is a little weaker. So
look at what happens to Florida State. Look, the last 3 weeks, the Seminoles, have disappeared, and this whole thing with Mike Norvell, it's crazy. Mike Norvell is more inconsistent than Harold Miner's jump shot. I don't get it. He's either all in, winning 13 games, or he's getting his ass kicked most of the season. It's inexplainable.
Yeah, this isn't a topic that has come in via the mailbag, but I'm glad you brought up Mike Norvell, and I did mention Florida a few minutes ago. Uh, both of those programs could be hitting the reset button on their coaches pretty soon. Billy Napier, obviously, we've been hearing it since last season. Mike Norvell, he's 36-30 now as the head coach at Florida State. I think he's had 6 3-game losing streaks since he's been in charge, and I think they had 8 total in like the 40 years before that 3-game losing streak. So just in the Norvell era, there's been these losing skids that they don't seem to be able to get out of. So I think without question, both of those jobs could potentially come open. Florida, more likely than not, less, smaller buyout. Florida State, bigger buyout. But at some point, right, this is a program that's been pushing to get out of the ACC to remain relevant in the national scheme. And if they go, I don't know, 6-6, 5-7 potentially if the season goes off the rails for Florida State. I don't know how Mike Norvell survives that. So my point here being that Miami's peaking at the right time, Carlos,
Yep.
and we've seen recruiting and the way players move. That's why this season so important for them to get the job done. Get to the finish line. Get to the finish line, right?
Yep.
Even if you don't win a national championship, you win the ACC. You show people that it's not just lip service, right? That you can actually deliver and finish the job. That it's not just about player development and spending. Then all of a sudden, your boosters and everybody around your program want to give more and more money, and they want to really get behind this. And this thing can just snowball into what it was in the 80s, 90s, and 2000s when this program was playing continually for national championship. But that's why you can't have a hiccup. You can't lose to Louisville when you're 2-touchdown
Yep.
favorite at home. You can't lose on the road at Pittsburgh because you lost there in 2017 as with an undefeated team. You got to show all of these players, all of these donors, everybody around your program that shit is over.
Yep.
And until Mario does that, brother, you're going to have PTSD.
And that same word we talked about, consistency. If they are consistently this good year after year and competing for a playoff spot or getting into the playoffs consistently, which they should be doing if you're an elite team, then that changes the brand again and gets them to the national spotlight and makes them, a little bit more elevated in the minds of recruits. It's not just about the money in the NIL. They're seeing the development of the program. They're seeing the success. They're putting guys in the NFL. If Ruben Bain gets drafted top 3, they've got another guy after Cam Ward that just went number 1 that possibly could go number 1, according to some people. I don't think he will. He's a little too small. But if he goes in the top 10, you've got another first-round pick there. So it builds upon that. And you've got a small window here where Florida and Florida State are down. They're going to make the change. I think both teams are obviously going to move on from their coaches at some point. It's to be determined when they're going to do that with Mike Norvell. I think it happens this season, at the end of the season with Billy Napier. Then you've got a window of rebuilding for those two programs. So you've got about a 3-year window now where you can take advantage of these two programs and just basically put them to sleep for that time period and continue to build your brand and establish yourself as the best program in the country. Now, here's my question. I've got my 2 names. Who do you think Florida and Florida State should go after if they fire those coaches?
Great question. I have a list I started to put together this week. I'm going to go to my phone so you know.
Look at this. This is incredible. We never rehearse anything. We never talk about anything. But look at this synergy, Manny.
These are the names of guys that I think could be the coach at Florida. That if I'm Florida, number 1, you're going after Lane Kiffin.
That's
right,
my
at
number
Ole
1.
Miss.
Number 1.
I think Jed Fish at Washington is another serious contender.
I like him.
Him having attended there. 2 names that aren't out there that I'm putting out there that I think would be guys that if they get turned down by Lane Kiffin and Jed Fish for whatever reason, which I don't think either of them would turn them down. Maybe Kiffin does if Ole Miss has a special season this year. 2 other names that intrigue me: John Sumrall, who's at Tulane and has done a really good job in all the places he's been. The smaller schools, sort of waiting for that big SEC job to open up. I think he's a guy at Florida that I would look at. And then Jeff Brom, just because of how good he is as an offensive coach. And you think about, and obviously Jeff Brom is at Louisville. That's home for him. But if I'm Jeff Brom and I beat Miami on Friday, and all of a sudden everybody's talking about my program and how we're, consistently one of the best in the ACC, and I'm looking to work with a bigger budget and actually play for championships. I mean, Florida, to me, is a better job than Penn State. Like, I had this argument with people at work earlier this week.
100%.
People are talking about Penn State is the best job, and there's 100, stadium with 110,000 people.
Penn State hasn't won a national title since
I was 8 years old.
1986, right?
Since I was 8 years old, you and I were. I mean, that's how long it's been.
Right.
And I get the love affair with the Big Ten, but they've won four Big Ten championships since they've been in the league. That's it. And as a Miami guy, I shouldn't be saying that. Miami still hasn't won the ACC, but I'm telling you, like, it's not like there's some proven commodity that's a bunch of guys have gone there and just dominated and won consistently. It's been that long.
They get
40
good
years.
players, but Florida gets better players. It's harder to recruit Texas,
Yes.
Florida, Georgia, and California in Penn State than it is in a warm weather place like Gainesville. And that's why I think they should not only should they go after Kiffin. If they miss on Kiffin, I think they should also go after Signetti, see if they could pull him from there. I know he's a guy that loves the Midwest. He's from the Midwest. His wife is from Indiana, I believe. So he might be more comfortable in the Big Ten and staying there and taking the Penn State job if he wants to move on. But I take a swing at him anyway.
Yeah. A couple of other names out there just to know. Alex Goldish at USF, who we've mentioned many times.
Yeah.
To me, he's an Auburn, assuming Auburn fires its coach at the end of the season. He's an Auburn, Arkansas, SEC lower tier, maybe even Kentucky if they end up getting rid of the guy they've had there forever. Dan Mullen's another one. Not that Florida State would hire him, but I think Dan Mullen is another guy. He's had success coming back to UNLV.
I think Florida State should look at him. I mean, as one of the options, just because, listen, compare what Mullen did during his time as Florida to what Billy Napier's done.
Right.
I mean, now it looks foolish that they fired him.
Right. Yeah. Virginia Tech has an opening. I think North Carolina will have an opening. I predicted 6 more firings, by the way.
Now here's an interesting question. Do you think Florida State circles back and gives Jimbo Fisher a call?
That's an interesting question. I don't think Jimbo Fisher. I don't see like the whole going back to somebody that you had before. Bobby Petrino is came back to Arkansas. They made a big deal about that. I don't see that. I think Jimbo's kind of past his prime. I think he's
Scott Frost back at UCF.
Yeah, that's another one.
Rich Rod back at West Virginia.
Yeah, but what are those guys? It's not like they came back and it's instant hits. You know what I'm saying? Like Mullen to me is a guy who's more of a proven commodity, but he's doing it at a G5 school now. Mullen is good at what he does. He's just not an excellent recruiter. That's why he got run out of Florida. Yeah, so I don't know. Florida State, Deion's health is an issue. He's been sick, obviously the last couple of years. I thought he was only sticking around essentially for his sons. He's got a whole lot of political issues behind the scenes with people at Florida State. So I don't see that one happening.
Yeah, he's not going there. He's not.
I'm really interested to see what happens with James Franklin, because whoever hires James Franklin after this, and look, there's a lot of programs that would take 10 wins, 9 wins every single season with James Franklin. But Florida State, where do you turn? I don't know. I don't know. I don't look at the landscape and think there's an automatic guy I hire at Florida State, because if you go the G5 route, you're essentially doing what you did with Norvell. Norvell was a G5 guy, right? So, I mean, Ryan Silverfield at Memphis replaced Norvell at Memphis. Ricky Rain from Old Dominion. I don't know. I don't know where you go if you're Florida State. It's really interesting in terms of, what makes sense and who would want those jobs. Maybe it's Miami's offensive coordinator. Maybe it's Shannon Dawson. I don't know. I know Shannon wants a head coaching job. And he'd take it if it's the right place. But it's fun to speculate, Carlos.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we did it.
Yeah. All right, guys. That's it for
questions?
this week's. No more questions, brother. At least none that I've seen. Is there any more in the
I don't know
that we missed? Let's see here. This is from Joe Yu. With UF getting a new coach and FSU being a dumpster fire, wants to get a new coach but can't afford to, are there any elite players that might transfer that would fit our culture for next year's team? I don't know that. God, I guess Florida has some guys. Vernell Brown would be one I would take, the receiver. Certainly, who knows what Florida's, what happens and who leaves, because those guys, Florida's going to spend money to keep those guys too.
Yeah.
I think getting a big receiver, as you mentioned on the show earlier, Carlos, is a need for Miami.
Yeah, but we've already got our shopping list. We've already done that. We're good.
Yeah, we put out the shopping list for you guys. So, all right, that wraps it up for this week's Wide Right. For Carlos Ledo of the MIA All-Day Pod, I'm Manny Navarro for The Athletic. We will see you guys next week.
Peace.